You took in a day of Bills camp. You're, you fly in, you swoop out. How do you handle your busy training camp schedule? Because, sleeping in hotels, driving long miles, maybe flying a little bit too, obviously. But this is the draw on your reserves physically.
You gotta stretch when you get to the hotel room out of the car. That's the number one. The low back is the first thing that starts to go after all those sits in the car. And I was feeling it standing out there today. I said, all right, I got to do a longer session when I get to the hotel in Philly tomorrow. Yeah. It's a great time, though. It really is. I feel for the national writers who are there in the West and they got to fly everywhere. I love the 2 weeks of driving. You bump into everybody. You say hi to folks. It's good to be. I missed Buffalo last year. Couldn't make it. And so getting to come back this year, I love the college of it all. It's a good time.
Yeah. And this is also a training camp that's well established. Sean McDermott going into his 8th season.
They run a smooth operation.
Yes,
really
it's well oiled. If you're coming in, you let them know they know how to handle. They've got it. Everything's laid out for you. Yep. What are your impressions? What did you expect to find when you came here?
Yeah, so it's nice. The one day is tough because you never want to draw too much. It's a great beat here, and so you're talking to the beat, kind of hearing how everybody is. And then the number one thing that I just like to be able to see is, all right, what do the rookies look like? Do they look like they belong? What team are they running with? Right, and kind of where are people falling in that depth chart, right? Because you forget that Shaq Thompson is a guy who joined Buffalo, and he's coming off the injury, but Sean McDermott knew him from the time there, and he's out there running with the ones. There's no Terrell Bernard, obviously, but he's out there running with the ones. And it reminds you, okay, so this is where they're at on linebacker depth. You see Trey White out there, running. Obviously, there's no Hairston right now, but still, he's been a guy who's been moving with the ones in camp. And so, I can read my training camp updates, and I can look at my depth chart. But the main thing for me is lets me see some of that. And then you get to take the temperature, right? You talk to a couple coordinators, you talk to a couple players. I was just speaking with Greg Rousseau about what they're doing defensive front-wise because it looks like they're doing some different stuff that I'm used to seeing from Buffalo. So you get a chance to expose yourself to the team and see what they're trying to figure out, new stuff. They ran hook and ladder 4 times. It's okay. Maybe Buffalo's going to run hook and ladder at some point this year. You kind of expose yourself to the stuff a little bit.
As far as, because we've had you on earlier in the offseason and talked to you about the prospects for this team, and there are some clear force multiplier players on this roster. Keon Coleman I would list as one. Dalton Kincaid would probably be another, especially if he gets back to his rookie form. Are there any other force multipliers that you see, whether it's on the defensive side of the ball, maybe even in the return game, if Laviska Shenault is a guy that wins that job? Who do you kind of key in on as players that could finally put this team over the hump, so to speak?
Well, I think that when they brought Von Miller in a couple years ago, it was to have a playoff ringer, a guy who can win against the top tackles in the pass rush in the AFC playoff picture to win a playoff game. And that never manifested itself. And so I don't know the names. They brought in 6 different guys, right? They draft Landon Jackson, they draft TJ Sanders, they bring in Joey Bosa, they bring in Michael Hoyt, they bring in Larry Ogunjobi. By November, and obviously Greg Rousseau might get better, AJ Epinesa, by November I want to be able to point to a guy and say he's going to be able to win on that third down that gets the Bengals off the field, that gets the Chiefs off the field, that allows you to protect the lead, that allows you to win the game, right? The issue with the offense having the ball and losing these playoff games is, well, yeah, you could also have the ball as the offense be leading too, and you'd like to be able to get that one stop defensively.
Right.
And so to me, the number one X factor force multiplier I'm looking for from this Bills team is the ability to have a ringer of a pass rusher, because we talk about regular season football, you're really well coached, you have a roster of solid 11 dudes on defense, that's all hunky-dory. Then you get to January football, and January football is a different cat. You have to have guys who beat the other guys for 4 quarters. You have to have a Jamar Chase answer. You have to have a Lamar Jackson answer. You need those players. And with Buffalo, it's always been about the depth on defense, about the versatility. You're looking for those star players. They need one on the defensive line.
We have talked about that at length on our daily show here, and we're doing it again today because they have thrown draft picks at the problem. They've gone free agent route, as you mentioned, with Von Miller, now Joey Bosa, Ogunjobi. And now they've also brought in coaches, Ryan Nielsen, Jason Rebrovich.
Yeah.
They got these guys that came in. They're throwing coaches at it now as well. So it's all hands on deck. And it's obvious that they see the problem the same way as you do. What else do you suggest other than stinking and getting a top draft pick?
Right, yeah. So that's as being said about Jamar Chase back in the day, right? It's like, yeah, they got Jamar Chase at 5 overall. I don't get to pick at 5 overall. And there's some truth to that. There's some, prevarication to that. But there certainly is some truth to that. I do think that defensively, the addition of Ryan Nielsen, I think that they're going to want to do a little bit different stuff with the front than they've done previously, a little bit different stuff in terms of bringing pressures that they've done previously. You really want to be able to trust your safeties when you do a lot of the sending pressure packages and rotating coverages. And I think last year, understandably, they were figuring out what their safety room was over time. Cole Bishop missed all of training camp last year. You're hoping that you can get a big year 2 jump from a guy like a Cole Bishop, and you can trust him a little bit more to do some funkier stuff in the front. So I think that again, what they are defensively, and this is to Sean McDermott's credit, they're an extremely well-coached group, gets the best out of a lot of players. They elevate a lot of players, right? You've seen so many round 3 and round 4 and round 5 picks become useful players for this defense. That is to his credit. It hits a ceiling. And if you're going to hit that ceiling where, okay, we rush 4, we drop 7, we play in the nickel, and we just out-discipline you, and we out-hustle, and we out-teamwork you, then you need to have a couple of pitches. You need to have a strikeout pitch. You need to have that 12-6 curveball. You need to have that changeup. So that way when you run into a Mahomes, you run into a Burrow, you run into a Lamar, these guys are just too good that you can't out-execute them. You can't out-no-mistake them. Then you actually have the ability to say, all right, we're going to change the way we do our fronts. We're going to move some pictures on you. We're going to get those key plays. So hopefully more creativity on defense.
I know you had some time to sit down with Joe Brady,
Yep.
The OC here. Some of our observations here through the first week of camp is there seems to be even more pre-snap motion than there was last year. What did you kind of glean from him, in terms of maybe some wrinkles and changes that he's looking at?
The cool thing that I think Joe talked about was there's a lot that they did really well last year. Some of their 6 offensive line stuff, their shotgun running stuff that a lot of teams in the league want to do this well, and the Bills just walked in and were immediately good at it. And there's a temptation as the coordinator to be like, yep, and this is our bread and butter, and we live with it, and no one's ever going to catch up. And Brady's very clearly very oriented on, okay, we know we did some cool stuff with 6 offensive line, but teams are going to be teed into the tendencies. We have to be better passing off of it. We have to have more change-ups off of it, so on and so forth. Like, yeah, we do a great job throwing to Khalil Shakir out of the backfield and James Cook out of the backfield. But you only have so many plays there, and you want to be able to iterate on it and go off of it. And so it's always good to hear an offensive coordinator who, yes, I know what home base is, but I know if I stay at home base, eventually I'm going to lose ground, right? Because defensive coaches are going to catch up. They've been
working on it all off season.
Exactly, yeah. So we're the acknowledgement that we're going to want to stay ahead on things. Most interesting thing I'm most interested to see is what they continue to do in the running game. Just because last year they got so good running, just like 2 or 3 concepts from the gun. They should over and over
and they
again.
were 51% run, too.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. It was a huge part of Josh's improvement last year was the ability to rely on the running game. They need to keep that alive, which means they need to stay ahead of the curve.
What do you think the next trend will be if you looked into your crystal ball and you look around the league? What can we look for maybe as a trend? I mean, we saw a couple of teams last year, most notably the Baltimore Ravens, Derrick Henry in that running game, the Philadelphia Eagles and their offensive line, and Saquon, the Bills being 51% run. All those teams were right there at the end of the season. What other trends might happen this year?
Yeah, you're going to continue to see teams that throw screens really well succeed on offense. And one of the number one things to understand about the screen game, and specifically if you remember like last year, the first 2-3 weeks of the season, everyone was playing too high and the passing numbers were down, and we all had like a conniption, like, oh, we're never going to pass again, and the league is going to be, boring and dull.
Football,
exactly, yeah. One of the reasons why passing numbers look lower than they are is because teams are throwing a lot more screens than they used to. And the screens in a coach's mind are an extension of the running game. There's something you package to a running play. Okay, we're going to have this handoff, but also going to have a wide receiver screen over here. So for them, it's a way to make the running game work. It's a touch behind the line of scrimmage with blockers ahead of it. It feels like a run play to them, but they get souped into our passing numbers, right, when you look at a league-wide perspective. So more and more teams are throwing screens as packaged plays, as calls attached to running plays. It's a big thing in a Joe Brady offense has been for going back to his LSU days, right? And so your ability to have there was Matt Collins last year, Josh Palmer this year, Dalton Kincaid lining up out wide. Your ability to have players who are good blocking in space, that's stock blocking work. Your ability to get offensive linemen out there. I think about Deion Dawkins' ability to explode and go get out in space. He's so good at it. And then your Khalil Shakir players, right? And your guys who are really, really good with the ball in their hands. If you are good on screens, it's going to give you the ability to solve some of the too high problems defenses are presenting to you right now. One of the reasons why Buffalo endured some of the new too high stuff a lot better than, say, Kansas City did is because Buffalo was built better to throw screens than Kansas City was.
And, speaking of that, I know early separation in a down was somewhat of an issue for this offense in the passing game last year. It would appear, on the surface anyway, that they have 2 new receivers that are good at that, getting early separation in the down, whether it's Palmer or Moore, who was a pretty damn productive receiver for a Cleveland Browns team that had 4 different quarterbacks. He had 61 receptions for them last year. Do you see them as collective upgrades over Hollins and Cooper last year?
I was really excited to see Palmer and Moore when I came out here, and they were both on rest days. Like,
Yep.
So you kind of ask about it, and then you see how you go from there. I definitely think having a beater is really important, right? It's about 3rd and 6. Who do I want the ball to get to? I think they can be improvements on Hollins and improvements on Cooper from last year. I don't think either one of them is up to the caliber of Shakir, and I wish that this team did more to use Shakir, not just at or near line of scrimmage, but get him some more separation opportunities in the intermediate area of the field. I think he can do that well. And so my hope is that there's going to be some more trust in Shakir in that role. There's also, last year was everybody eats. This year is okay. Maybe we want a few less people to eat, maybe eat a little bit more of the pie. And that's a reasonable that's a reasonable way to think about it.
Right.
But you don't want to fall into a trap where you say, well, Josh Palmer's our 3rd and 5 guy, and then all of a sudden you're taking the decision out of Josh Allen's hands, because the decision is so good when it's in Josh Allen's hands, going off of last season, right? So a little bit, you want, okay, Palmer's going to be our man beater. We're going to be able to get the ball quick to him on 3rd and 5. But also, if you're still back in that world where it's Josh making a decision, getting outside the pocket, there are a lot of teams who would really like to be in that world. You have to remember what you've got here is pretty good.
Yeah, and you're right. It is like that, but it also takes time, because you got Josh on a 3rd and 5, and there's 5 guys that he feels like you got to have 5 guys he trusts to throw the football on 3rd and 5.
Yep.
So Moore hasn't been here that long. Palmer hasn't been here that long. Shakir has.
Yep.
Kincaid was in and out last. That kind of
Keon
Jackson Hawes is a new face in here. So we got some. It takes a training camp for them to get 8 or 9 guys. It really is 8 or 9 guys where Josh says, on a 4th and 1, when we got to have it, I will throw to the guy who I haven't targeted in a quarter and a half.
Yep.
I think that's the other side of that sword that we've seen. Brownie and I suffer from, he calls it Bill's myopia.
Yeah.
What are some of the storylines around the league? So if I can take my nose off our grindstone here in St. John Fisher, what's going on around the NFL that we need to know about?
I think the Colts quarterback competition is one of the bigger ones. Saints is obviously a big deal too, but in Indianapolis right now, there's a lot of excitement for what Anthony Richardson looks like for actually a healthy camp and for a put-together camp. He's playing some of his best ball there, so that's exciting. I was just in Cleveland for that quarterback competition, if you want to call it that, but that's
a
less,
friendly word for it.
Yeah, that's less of a, we got guys competing, and more of a we don't know how to feed as many of these mouths, right, and kind of figure out who we want to get our reps for. So I think it's going to be Joe Flacco for them.
Is that a sideshow in Cleveland, or is it, are they handling it?
I think that now that they don't have to get Kenny Pickett reps because Pickett has a hamstring, it's a little bit easier with 3 mouths to feed. I think when it's 4, you have to build the entire practice around making sure we get enough reps on these guys.
Yeah, you got to cut your field in half.
Exactly.
And put
they're doing 2 spotting with what they have 2 different quarterback stations kind of going on at once, right? And that's really difficult. It's difficult on the staff and on the quarterback, certainly. It's tough on the receivers, right?
Receivers and backs.
A lot of reps.
One of those guys is a lefty, too, Dylan Gabriel. And so you're used to catching the ball, all of a sudden it's spinning the other direction.
Yeah.
And you want to give grace to these receivers who aren't exactly got the correct ball at the correct time, catching it as easily, because they're getting so many different throws. And so that's something that they are figuring out. But Cleveland knows that they're a team right now that's figuring things out. So there's not, ring the alarm bells. What are we going to be? It's just, all right, we're in a learning process here. And then, some of the coaching changes are obviously going to be some of the biggest notes, and then discovering some of this. And so watching what that new offense looks like in Detroit, right, with John Morton stepping in for Ben Johnson, for Nick Caley in Houston, and what they're going to look like with the Texans. Ben Johnson now in Chicago, and the intensity that he's bringing to practice. You're hearing a lot about how that's as a culture change there in Chicago. Guys are getting reamed out for mental
They're getting
mistakes,
sent off.
Exactly. Ben Johnson is one intense cat. He really, really is, and it remains to be seen if that draws the best out of Chicago, or if Chicago's roster can't handle that. So it's a fun time in the NFL. Always is.
Yeah.
Ben, thanks for the time. As always, we appreciate it. Safe travels on the rest of your training camp tours. But as always, we appreciate the time.
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate it.
Good to see you.
That's ESPN NFL analyst Ben Solak joining us.